What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Mistfall Hunter is almost here. It launches on July 29th, and after a massive open beta, the early word from everyone who played it is starting to roll in, and people are clearly paying attention because the demo pulled in hundreds of thousands of players, and the open beta packed in tens of thousands more. And the pitch here is wild because this is basically Dark Souls meets Escape from Tarkov, a dark fantasy extraction game where you drop in, fight monsters and other players for loot, and try to escape before you lose everything. It is even backed by the creator of Diablo. So is this the extraction game that finally cracks the code, or just another one that gets lost in the pile? I went through all the previews and beta impressions, so let us break down what people loved and the few things they're worried about. Let us jump in. So let us set this up properly. Mistfall Hunter comes from a new studio called Bell Ring Games, published by Skystone Games, the company founded by David Brevik, the guy who created Diablo. So there is some serious pedigree behind it. It is a third-person action RPG with Souls-like combat, but wrapped around an extraction loop, and it is buy to play at just $25 with no pay to win, which is genuinely refreshing to hear. The setting is a grim Norse fantasy world called Weaverreach, where the gods are dead and a golden corrupting fog called the Gilden Mist is slowly rotting everything it touches. You play a revived hunter sent into that mist to gather what is left, and everything ahead comes from people who actually played the beta and the demos, so this is the real early word. Here are the quick facts before we dig in. It launches July 29th on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox, and it is on Game Pass on day one, so a lot of you can try it without paying anything extra. Otherwise, it is a one-time $25 or $40 for the deluxe edition, no subscription, and no pay to win, so keep all of that in mind as we get into how it actually plays. All right, if you have never touched an extraction game, here is the core loop, because it is the whole hook. You pick one of the classes, then you drop into a map crawling with monsters and rival players, all hunting the same loot you are. Over time, that golden mist closes in like a battle royale circle, squeezing everyone together and forcing confrontations. You can go in solo or squad up with two friends, and the raids fill out with a mix of real players and monsters, so no two runs ever really play the same. And here is the clever twist reviewers loved. To escape, you have to hunt down a little creature called a Returner Woodling, and killing it lets you open an extraction portal from almost anywhere instead of sprinting to one fixed exit. Pull it off and you keep everything you found, but die out there and you lose all the gear you brought in unless a teammate revives you. That risk right there is the entire thrill. So let us start with the combat, because that is where most of the early impressions spend their time. It is Souls-like at its core with combos, stamina, dodges, and a healing flask, but almost everyone said it feels faster and more arcade than a strict From Software game. PC Gamer described it as more like the modern God of War than something like Elden Ring, which is a great way to put it. There is also a free aim system where you target enemy weak points, so landing a clean headshot actually matters, even against other players. The bow play in particular got called super rapid and satisfying, though it does chew through your stamina fast, and it was popular enough that Games Radar called this one of the top demos of the entire Steam Next Fest. Now, a couple of previewers did say the movement and combat are not quite as polished as a proper single-player Souls-like, so it is not flawless. But the overall feel genuinely won people over, including some who normally cannot stand extraction games at all. We will not really know how it holds up over hundreds of raids until launch, but the foundation here sounds strong. One writer at PC Games summed the whole thing up about as well as anyone could. They said it turns Dark Souls into Escape from Tarkov, and it made them scream. When a hands-on preview is pulling that kind of reaction out of people, that is exactly the energy you want to see this early. Now let us talk about the classes, because this is where the RPG depth really shows up. There are 6 classes at launch, and each one has 2 different weapon stances and its own skill tree, so there's a ton of room to build your character your own way. You have got the Black Arrow, a ranger who can go full glass cannon or lean into status effects. The Sorcerer, a straight-up mage. The Mercenary for pure melee. The Shadow Strix, a stealthy assassin. Then you have the Seer, and finally the Withered Knight, a two-handed greatsword tank that got added during the beta. Reviewers really like that variety because your class completely changes how you approach a raid, and it gives you a real reason to keep coming back and trying something new. And because each class carries 2 separate specializations, you can lean the same character in totally different directions, which is the kind of depth people really did not expect from an extraction game. And that accessibility clearly landed. One previewer over at MMORPG.com titled their entire write-up the casual extraction game I did not know I needed, which is a fascinating thing to hear about a genre that is usually known for being brutally hardcore and punishing. And that leads perfectly into the loot and the stakes, because this is where Mistfall Hunter does something really smart. Yes, you lose your gear when you die, but multiple previewers stress that it is a lot less punishing than something like Tarkov or Dark and Darker. Loot drops constantly, gear is cheap to replace, and one writer said they reached the best available equipment in a single session. On top of that, there is a full economy with merchants to trade at, a shared stash, so your loot carries across all of your characters, and an upgradable camp back at base. So the grind actually has a payoff without the crushing anxiety that scares so many people away from the genre. There's also a cosmetic store running on a currency called fake coins, with the developers promising zero pay to win, though that is one of those things we can only really judge once it is live. It is the extraction loop, just with the difficulty dial turned to something a lot more welcoming. Now the world itself, because the atmosphere is a real highlight. This is grim Norse dark fantasy done right. All bleached forests, ruined temples, and towering stone giants looming out of the fog. But the previews pointed out something clever about the level design too. Because the maps are these tight labyrinthine spaces, you get ambushes around every single corner, which the writer at PC Games End said makes it feel completely different from the wide open layouts of gun-based extraction games. Every hallway could be hiding a monster or a fully geared player just waiting to jump you, and that tension in a world this moody is a huge part of what makes the whole thing click. All right, so as positive as these previews have been, they have not been perfect, and you deserve the honest picture. The biggest one that keeps coming up is balance. Over at MMORPG.com, the previewer flat out said the sorcerers seem completely overpowered with the ranged classes close behind, so the melee builds might feel a little weak at launch. The second concern is performance. The folks at The Gamer and a lot of creators reported stuttering and rough performance during the beta, even on high-end machines. The developers have promised optimization for launch, but that is unproven until it is actually out. There were also player complaints about matchmaking, about getting stomped by fully geared opponents when you are just starting out, and a few people felt the story and the solo experience were nothing to write home about, since this is really built around the multiplayer. And there is one more question hanging over all of it, which is whether people are simply getting tired of extraction games, because despite those strong beta numbers, the buzz around this one has been surprisingly quiet. None of these look like deal breakers on their own, but they are the patterns I would want to watch closely. So after going through all of it, here's my honest read. If the idea of a dark fantasy Dark Souls mixed with an extraction game excites you and you can live with a few early rough edges, then everything these previews are praising points to something genuinely fun. And here's the kicker: at just $25 and free on Game Pass on day one, the barrier to simply trying it is basically nothing, which makes it really easy to recommend jumping in. Now, if you are someone who gets tilted losing your gear, or you want to wait for the balance and the performance to get sorted out, it might be smart to give it a few weeks of patches first. But the early word is a lot more promising than a lot of people expected. For $25, honestly, the risk here is about as low as it gets. So tell me down in the comments, are you dropping in on July 29th or waiting to see how it shakes out? And that is the early word on Mistfall Hunter. I will keep you posted with more coverage and guides as we get closer to launch. So if this helped you out, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you do not miss it. But that is going to wrap it up for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the very next one.